Good morning, everyone. That's my polite way of saying, let's go over there, Michael, Charles, etc. Well, good morning. How's everyone doing? Good? All right. We have a couple of, I think, real special things for this morning. And I'm going to combine a couple of things here. One is, anyone that came yesterday, we had an amazing time at Greenlock. We talked about that. Edith had come down a couple weeks ago. She's the one that runs the place. And yesterday we sent out about 42 people, men, women, and children. And it was just an amazing day. We picked the best time. We picked 1 o'clock, right when all the rain came down. And we have some pictures. So just so, as I'm talking, just see some of these pictures. Like, we had 4 major projects and then like several other smaller projects. And you know, when we were singing that song this morning, the first one that we sang, it talks about like, it made it almost seem like where you're at right now, like in this place, how good it is. And I'm thinking about it as when I'm out making a difference in the community. That's where I feel closest to God. That's where I feel like, you know what, this is where we're gonna make a difference and leave something behind. And it was just amazing. So if you were a part of that yesterday, just wanted to thank you so much. I had people just tell me, again, like in the rain, it was just great. And people are excited they want to do it again. And so we do it every weekend. We're not going to do that. But it is an opportunity. We talk about that all the time, about having opportunities to serve in our community and represent what we talk about when we say the church. And we're trying to redefine what that looks like and what that means. So let me transition from that, because we're going to talk about leadership this morning. I'm going to have Kate come up in a minute and share her story. But before that, I want to advertise, because these are all connected. When we think about leadership in the church, leadership in the community, etc., we're trying to say, how do you get things done? How do you make a difference in people's lives? And so I want you to watch this Leadership Summit video on August 11th and 12th. We're going to go over to Community Covenant Church in Rehoboth, and they host it there. And it's a 2-day conference where you can get better at leadership. And we talk about every single person is a leader. Whether you're leading your own life, leading your family, in business, in teaching, whatever it is, we can always get better at this thing called leadership. And so first I want you to watch this video, and then I'm going to bring up Kate, and I want you to see the connection between it. All right, so watch this, and then we'll come back up. I want us to be excited about that. The first person up there said, I want us leaders lead you into the unknown. And this morning we're going to talk about risk. And this all goes together, because when you go into the unknown and you start taking risks, that's where we find God. And I love how the bookend came with that. So it's already been laid out for us. God has a plan for us. It's like, will we engage in that? And every single person has to make a choice to say yes to God and say, use me. Use the gifts that I have so that I can make a difference in the world with the time that I've been given. And so I hope that you sign up for that. We have an early bird rate. It's on the website. Right on the home page, you click on it. I think by June 28th, it's going to be $99. After that, it remains $129 for the rest of the time. If that's a lot of money to you and you want to go but you can afford it, just let us know. If anyone wants to sponsor people, let me know. But this is an opportunity for us as a church to get better at leadership so that we're challenged. So say, how can I make a difference? And Kate, why don't you come up on that note? And I asked Kate to come up because I'm going to set this up. Give her a nice warm welcome. Now, Kate is a teacher. I'll let her tell her story a little bit. But the other day, last month, we did a leadership training. It was at my house. At my house. And what we did, we showed a video by Marcus Buckingham, and it was talking about this idea that we build with our strengths. We all have strengths and weaknesses, but a lot of us spend a lot of our time, the majority of our time, focusing on our weaknesses. He's saying that's all backwards. We need to spend the majority of our time building with our strengths. And so Kate came to that discussion, and in that video, there was a 4-minute place where they had a video of a school in New Jersey. It was an all-girls school. And all of these girls had been given up on because they had a learning disorder. They had ADD, ADHD, or dyslexia, or whatever it was. But in their other school, they were made to feel less than, they had been looked over, and these girls turned to drugs, they turned to sex, they turned to, they were suicidal, etc. And this school says, we want to take you. So they talked about that classroom, right? In the regular public school room, there's that classroom for the quote-unquote special needs kids. And they were made to feel less than. This school said, you know what, our entire school is that classroom. And we welcome everybody. And they take the time for every single girl that comes in there, and they learn their story. And they learn what they're good at. They learn what their strengths are. And they play to that. And at the end of the year, they all give a presentation to talk about what they're good at. And you should have seen the transformation in these kids' lives when they went from feeling this way, where they had no dignity, they had no self-worth, no self-esteem, suicidal, and then all of a sudden, because a teacher stood up and said, it's not right. And we're going to care for these young ladies, and we're going to give them hope for a future. Sounds Christ-like. And then because of that, they invested in them, they turned around their whole countenance. And with that, Kate talked to me, she sent me an email the next day, of a student. No, you're going to tell a story, right?
You're giving away my whole
All right, sorry. Go.
That was the first 90 seconds of what I was going to say. Okay, so like that video said, my knees are knocking. Getting up and talking in front of adults is not my strength. I'm better in front of 8th graders. But I wanted to talk about a student who is one of 600 in my school, and it is very easy to let students like this fall through the cracks. This student is truant. He comes to school maybe 2 out of 5 days a week. He's very poor. He's very dirty. He's very sleepy.
Sorry.
He's just a student who, when he shows up, his head goes down. He doesn't produce much work. And here we are in June. And all of a sudden, I had just been struck with something really remarkable about this student. But before that happened, I feel like God has been knocking on my heart to kind of become more of a leader in my school. I accepted a summer position with an organization called ThriveCan, who focuses on personalized learning and really how to reach to each student to help them play to their strengths and to help them to achieve. I accepted that position for the money. I applied to it for the money. I didn't know anything about what it was. I went to the first training and I came home and talked to my husband about it. I said, wow, this is really kind of cool. House where we learned about, playing to your strengths. And I thought, wow, that was kind of cool. And then I was just slapped across the face by God in my classroom. This student, we had been doing a unit on 12 Angry Men, which is a play written by Reginald Rose in the 1950s about a jury trial and how these 12 men had to get past their biases to come up with a fair verdict for a young minority boy who was accused of killing his father. So we read that play together, and then we watched the 1997 version, and we talked about how the issues of bias and racism were relevant even in the 1990s, and then we talked about how might that be presented today. Maybe the defendant would have been an illegal immigrant or a Muslim, or how would those issues be presented today. So we read this, we watched it, we discussed it, and then I gave the kids a writing prompt, and the student put his head down, and he produced nothing. And I did, went around, okay, let's organize this, let's get some ideas, nothing. And I'm used to that by now, because I've been dealing with him since September. Well, a couple of days after this assignment had passed, he came up to me and he goes, I know I didn't write the essay, but I did make something, and I want you to see it. And I said, oh, okay. It was a couple of minutes at the end of class. I said, what is it? He said, well, can I get on your computer for a minute? And he logged onto YouTube, and he said, I know the prompt was to write an essay comparing and contrasting the play with the film that we watched. He said, but I couldn't do that, so I made this instead. And he showed me a video that I think Sean wants to show you. But what I learned is that, maybe the student can't read. He's 14 years old, he reads at a 3rd grade level. He probably will not progress more than that at this point. He cannot write a complete sentence. His math scores are very low, and he is on track to drop out of school. And that is what he intends to do, because he feels like there is nothing for him. And then I watched what he is able to do, and nobody ever took the time to find that out. And I just feel now that God has moved in me to kind of take this risk to step up as a leader in my district and to try to talk about making the time in the school day to try to help kids like this find their strengths. This student who is struggling comes to school, no wonder he doesn't want to be there. He has to take 2 periods of math and 2 periods of reading, and there isn't time for him to work on computers, which is his passion. So I just feel like I've been called to work through the summer fellowship that I'm doing with my district, through Sean mentoring me to be more of a leader, to just help students like this to try to work on their strengths so that they don't get lost in the shuffle. Is that good? All right, so that was his project that he did. The assignment was to compare and contrast the original with the newer version, and that's what he was able to come up with, which I think demonstrates his understanding of that. I asked him if I could show that to the other classes, and he said yes, and he allowed me to say who it was that did it. And he was so proud. And I will tell you that since then, he has come to school every day, and this is 4 weeks ago. I asked his other teachers in other grades, that is the longest stretch that he has ever come to school since starting middle school. He's in 8th grade now. So we're doing another project now, and it is a writing assignment. I'm an English teacher, and that's what we do. But I asked the student, I said, how would you show me your understanding of this information? And he came up with another idea, and he's working really hard on it, and I can't wait to see what he comes up with. But I was just really inspired to kind of just work a little bit harder to find out what kids' strengths are and to help them to realize that. Not that I shouldn't be working with him on his writing and his reading, because that is important and he needs those skills, but when you find out what people's strengths are, they shine a little bit brighter. So that's my story.
So I wanted Kate to stand there because when one person catches a vision about one life and just steps out and takes a risk. I mean, I don't know this young man, but there's hope. And we talked about us being blessing givers. We talked about, as a church that represents Jesus Christ, how can we be love to our community? How can we take leadership principles and put them into action? And I want you to feel so good about yourself because you took a step. You continue to take a step. And I want to encourage you in that. I want to support you in that because this is what happens when leaders step forward. And you're gifted and you have compassion, you have love, you have the thing that Christ has put in you. Now you get to give it to students. So thank you for stepping up.
Oh, thank you.
I just want to keep presenting you with stories and pictures of what I think the kingdom is about. Last week we talked about the importance of carving out time so that we could abide in Christ. We talked all about the art of abiding in Christ through prayer and scripture. But the idea of that was why? Why is it important to have these spiritual practices in our lives? It's so that we can hear from God. So that then when we hear from God, we'll say, yes, if I learn think about this, if I learn the discipline of taking time to get before God and learn how to listen to Him, if you carve out the time to do that, when He says something to you, when He prompts you, when you see a need, all of a sudden you say, I will carve out time to make a difference in this young person's life or this person's life, wherever it is. Because if we don't, because there's lots of excuses, there's lots of things, lots of pressure coming against us, a lot of resistance. But when we learn that skill, then God will use us to change people's lives. So, I'm not going to use that other video. We're going to go just right into it. This morning I'm naming the teaching, Trusting God Requires Taking a Risk. And I want to ask you a quick question, so please answer. How do you get to trust someone in your life? You're trying to build a relationship, you want to build trust. How do you do it? I didn't hear. Spending time with them? Yes. It's more to it than that, I think.
Well, you become trustworthy yourself.
We demonstrate
Given opportunities.
Give them opportunities to kind of, what would that look like to you?
Not a challenge, but it would look like empowering someone to make a decision that builds trust as a result of that.
Okay, so building a relationship through empowering them to have to make a decision, and then you can play off of that. How did that go?
Showing vulnerability.
Showing vulnerability yourself, right? So then you're opening yourself up to that person first.
Pretty much what I was going to say, allowing somebody close enough into your life that you are vulnerable and giving them the opportunity to inform you one way or the other and
Yeah.
open yourself up to being heard.
Perfect.
I was thinking, giving them responsibility for something that's important to you.
Give them responsibility for something that's important to you.
Yeah.
Believing in someone. Believing in someone.
Believing in someone? Good, all great answers. Betsy?
Letting them see what your weaknesses are and what their reaction is to them.
Letting them see what your weaknesses are and then see what their reaction is to them. Good. So vulnerability, exposing ourselves, sharing a little bit about. So to me, that's taking a risk. When I show my vulnerability, it says I'm taking a risk, right? So I feel like we need to be the risk takers first, because I think that's what God has in store for us. And so I feel like this leads to the great adventure in God. When we start to learn how to take risks for Him, all of a sudden we start to trust Him more and say, my gosh, look at how He performed in my life over here. Now He's giving me this challenge. How can I now perform in this area? Okay, so it's from one thing to another. So I put, Jesus tests His disciples to help them take risks. If you start reading scriptures with this mindset, watch how many times Jesus takes His disciples and puts them in uncomfortable positions to see how they're going to react. Because think about it, He's trying to build them up to what? To be the church. That's His one intention, right? He came so that He would raise up a group of people that would become the church, because He was going back to the Father. So He demonstrated how to live this life, how to live according to the kingdom's way. But then it was going to be on the people that followed Him. Would they continue to live out this challenge that's been given to them? So one of the tests that Jesus gives to His disciples is the feeding of the 5,000. And we're going to spend a lot of time this morning talking about that. So Francis, I'm going to ask you to come up and read from Mark 6:30. It's a lot of scripture, but I want you to just listen to it, and then we'll break it down a little bit more.
Mark chapter 6, 30 through 24. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to Him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, He said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, He had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So He began teaching them many things. By this time it was late in the day, so His disciples came to Him. "This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But He answered, "You give them something to eat." They said to Him, "That would take more than a half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?" "How many loaves do you have?" He asked. "Go and see." When they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in the groups on the ground, on the green grass. To sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven. He gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then He gave them to His disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. May God add a blessing to the reading and hearing and doing of His word today. Amen.
So does anyone know what happened right before the feeding of the 5,000? Little Bible trick. If you know this, this is impressive. Anyone? Everyone's looking at their phone real quick. So what happens right before this is King Herod beheads John the Baptist. I want you to think about that. This was Jesus' cousin. Someone who was actively doing good, actively doing ministry, actively building for the kingdom. So what I want to talk to you, we talk a lot about this idea, the kingdom and the battle versus good and evil. Because this is what this story represents to me. There's opportunity after opportunity here, but what do we see? Because there's the world's kingdom, right? King Herod represented power, authority. I can just, at the word of my mouth, have someone killed. And here's Jesus and his followers are looking for a king. But this king is going to be different. This king is going to be built on love and compassion and forgiveness and justice. So there's two kingdoms clashing here. And think about just if you were to lose someone that was very, very close to you, how would you feel in that moment? Step into this scene now. The feeding of the 5,000. And before we go through, because I'm going to break it down, I want you to think about a couple of things. The first thing is, think about how similar the first miracle that Jesus did, changing water into wine, is to this story. Because there's an action, right? And Mary said in the first miracle, said, do whatever he tells you to. Do. The word do, we're going to talk about that. Because it's about this trust. When I take a step and I go and do what he tells me to do, that's when miracles happen. Nothing was going to happen until they took the pitcher and took a step. Because it was still water. They're going to go up to Mark and they're going to give it to him. It's still water. Somewhere where they took the step, it turned into wine. This is very, very similar to what's going on here, but to me it tells me that there's risks involved for miracles to happen. It requires steps of faith. Now I want you to fast forward. So that was the first miracle. We talked about Peter's reinstatement a couple of weeks ago, after he had denied Jesus 3 times, and then they have this encounter on the beach, right? Where he reinstates him and it says, Peter, do you love me? Yes, feed my sheep. Think about in the feeding of the thousands, it says in Mark 6:34, they were like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus often takes them back to different miracles that had happened because he's trying to show his disciples the mission if they choose to follow. So Jesus is reminding Peter of this very experience that they had had before. Peter was there when they had the first miracle. Peter was there at the reinstatement. And he was challenged to keep feeding his sheep. So think about this. What are the things that God has done in your life to show himself faithful? Remember when. Remember when. Think about how often I read scriptures like this, I go, how could they not get this? Jesus kept talking, they kept seeing miracles, they kept seeing all these things happen. How come they don't get it? How come they don't believe in this all-powerful God who continues to change lives? Bring people back from the dead, heal people. Why don't they believe it? And then I think about my own life, and I sit there and go, it happens to me all the time. When it comes to Jesus' blessings in my life, I have a memory loss. Because I'm so consumed by what's happening now, that I forget how God was faithful in all these other areas of my life. One of the things that I would encourage you to do, if you've never done this before, I think it was back when I was in my early 30s, I did a thing, it was just a storyboard exercise. And I was in school at the time, and so what it was saying, go just do chapters of your life. So I kind of broke my chapters in from, I think from 0 to say 14 or 15. And during that time, I experienced a lot of loss. My parents had gotten divorced when I was 1. There was a relationship that my mother had that this man had become a father figure to me, which was a very, very difficult struggle for me. The whole idea of trying to figure out my own dad in that relationship. And I finally had accepted him as a father figure. And then we had come home one day and he was dead on the floor. And there was, when I was paralyzed, when I was 13 years old, you know, another loss, a loss of the physical. So from that chapter, I don't think I had a relationship with God at that point in my life. I had a belief in God, but not a relationship with Him. And then when I met Diane, everything changed, so that was good. It was all good from that point on. I ended up meeting Diane, and I met Christ when I was 21. We got married, so I have kids. A lot of great things were happening during that time. And just continue on the story. And for each chapter, though, you name it. You list all the events in your life, good and bad, right? And then put them in chronological order. And then give them chapters. And say, what was God doing? So the funniest thing to me, or the most ironic thing was, the things that I do today in ministry, in counseling, and taking care of people, is I look back to the first chapter of my life when I didn't even know Him. That He had a plan in mind, even in the midst of some of the worst situations that I've ever gone through in life. And He uses those very things today. So my point in saying this is like, this idea of remembering is what Jesus is trying to do to His disciples, because He has a mission worth giving their lives to. But will they take the action? And then the last thing I want you to see quickly before we get into it. Jesus gives them a picture of what this kingdom is all about. The feeding of the thousands has a lot to do with Jesus giving His disciples a picture of the kingdom and the mission that He has for them. And what this mission requires is two things. Step out in trust, care for the other. Step out in trust, care for the other. So the very first principle, I'm going to share a few principles this morning. The first principle is this: show others what the kingdom of God is by living it. The reason why I asked Kate to come up here, because to me, that's an example of it. That's showing us what the kingdom is all about. When we take a step, we care for another, and we bring God into the midst of that, and we watch what happens then. That's when the miracles happen. A student who hated coming to school starts coming to school. So Jesus' love for people wins out over exhaustion, sorrow, loss, vindication. So pick it up in Mark 6:34. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, He had compassion on them. We take this for granted. He was Jesus. He was God. Of course He would. Why? He's human. He just lost his cousin. He's just been ministering all day long, teaching them. Another translation talks that He also was healing people. So He's teaching and healing, teaching and healing. He had a choice to demonstrate compassion or not. And I believe this was a test from God to Jesus, as He often would do. But also how Jesus reacts by making that decision to demonstrate compassion and to heal them and to teach them, was showing them what the kingdom was about. Will they accept this? Will they get this? Put yourself in this story. Like I said, if you've lost somebody, if you're struggling today, if you're busy, if you're tired, if you're worn out, all of these things are happening to us. How do we respond to the needs around us? Do we show compassion? Or do we make excuses? So here's a tough question for all of us to consider. When life gets hard, will we choose to still be used by God? What picture of the kingdom are we showing others? That's a great question to think about. I hope it leads to action. So here's the test. Jesus often tested disciples to see where they're at. Mark 6:37-38 says, Jesus says to them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to Him, "That would take more than half a year's wages, Jesus." Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? I mean, think about their frustration. They also experienced this worst day. They've also been out all day long, part of this ministry. They're tired. Can't they just go and feed themselves? I love this because it always challenges me, like, I am tired. I'm done. And it's usually at those times when God puts a thing before you and says, what will you do? And I love this play on the word. See, it says, are we to go? Are we to go? Okay, I'm going to talk about the word go in a second, and I want you to see the distinction there. So that's the disciples' response, right? Are we to go? Do you really want us to go and do something now after everything we just gave? Everything we just did? The answer is yes. The other part, in the very first part of this, it says, you give them something to eat. And I could take this in all different ways, but just think about in one area, poverty in our world. Think about the poverty in our world. Who is going to stand up for them? He says, you go and give them something to eat. We don't have to take the Bible and just put it in its story. Take it out of it and say, what's the bigger principle? He's waiting for you and me to stand up and say, I will go. Regardless, I'm ready to make a difference. My question to us is, when I think about them, I'm thinking about the disciples just muttering under their breath. He's crazy. He's got heat stroke or something. What's the matter with him? Doesn't he know what we've done? And then I ask myself, what am I muttering? What do I mutter to myself? What excuses do I make? Wasn't Greenlock enough yesterday? Now I got to come to church too. Now after church is done, what do I have to do next? Isn't enough enough? Or maybe you say, I'm too busy. Or we disqualify ourselves. I'm not gifted enough. God can't use me. He'll use that other gifted person. The problem's way too big. What good could I do? Poverty's huge. My sacrifice isn't going to add up. Now, every week we've been talking about the Great Commission. Go and make disciples. This idea of going is huge, right? And then I just told you that the disciples are complaining, are we to go? And then in Mark 6:38 again, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. Go and see. He's challenging them. See, the disciples were so focused on their circumstances that they couldn't see what they already had. What did they see? They saw how tired they were. They saw how late it was. It's been a long day. We're sad. We just lost our good friend. God, just get them to go off and get food for themselves. But Jesus says, go and see. So he's going to challenge in the going part. But what I want us to think about just for a second is what we see. When we're consumed by problems, we will have a hard time seeing the miracle. Think about it. The miracle is right beyond the next step. The miracle is not going to happen unless there's action taken. So the goal for us is to stop seeing with our earthly eyes the problems that we're consumed by and start seeing what we already have. And I'm calling them ingredients for a miracle. Jesus is saying, go and see what you have. That's what he says to all of us. Look at your circumstance. What do you have? Don't play victim. What do you have? You have something that I can use. It's an ingredient for a miracle. But you have to first do the work. Here are a couple examples. You're going through a hard time in your marriage. What do you have? Think about that. What do you have if you're struggling in your marriage? I hope you have another couple in your life that you can go to, that will be there for you. that will listen to you, that will encourage you. I hope you have someone, if you need counseling, you get counseling. You have a friend, a word of encouragement. You can challenge yourself to say, you know what, I'm going to think about the good in my relationship. I'm not going to get overwhelmed by all the stuff that's happening. I'm going to look for the good. I'm going to read. I'm going to double down and reinvest. Maybe I'm going to start going on the date again. What if you're going through financial difficulties? What do you have? You're going through a hardship at work. If you're a teenager, you're struggling in school, what do you have? Is Proverbs 3 in that again? It's right at the beginning, I believe. Is it there? This verse is an incredible verse to think about. Because what it is, there's power in Scripture, because the power of Scripture leads to the power of story. And the power of story leads to the power of perspective. This idea of trust in the Lord is such a huge concept in Scripture. That's why this miracle that happens, Jesus is requiring his disciples, putting them in uncomfortable positions so that they will have to trust him. Lean not on your own understanding. We're going to talk the loaves of bread. This does not make any sense. There's 15,000 people there, right? It says it's the story of the 5,000, but that was only men. If you think about that culture, there's all the different women, right? They were probably married. Another 5,000 women, and then how many kids? Another at least 5,000 kids. Probably a crowd of 15,000. And Jesus looks at them and says, "What do you have? Get over your circumstances. Move on. This is what we're doing. This is what the kingdom is about. Look around you." And they come up with a little bit of bread and a little bit of fish. Now put yourself in that scene. All the excuses that they could be making right now is saying, this is foolish. This is ridiculous. Jesus, how do you expect us to feed 15,000 people with this? That's where they're at. This is a big thing for them to find out. Can they trust him? And this is the third principle is learn to take risks for God. And it's just taking that the step of trembling trust. In Mark 6:41 it says, "Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all." The miracle hadn't happened yet. Think about it. The miracle hadn't happened yet. There's no way this could happen. I'm going to fail. You're setting me up. All the doubts, all the fears are keeping them in place. Their feet are locked. Finally, one of them, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, takes a loaf of bread and a couple of pieces of the fish and goes to the first family, takes a step, and feeds the family. He still has comfort. He knows, I have enough to feed that family. Now what? Will he take another step? Because sooner or later, I only have one loaf of bread here. I only have a couple of bites of fish. I'm going to take another step. And then all of a sudden, the miracle happens with that next family when they was going to reach into the basket, and there's more. And he goes to the next family, and there's more. And they go, "Pete, you see what's happening over here? This is absolutely amazing." And now we're getting goosebumps because they're all of a sudden going, "Oh my God. Everything that we've gone through, everything we've invested, everything we've sacrificed, it's going to work. Because we serve a powerful God who can take this and feed the thousands." Jesus is giving them a picture. But will they remember? Because we know the rest of the story. We keep needing to be reminded. Right? It's not easy what I'm saying. It is so hard to do. But as the church, Chuck, do you mind if I embarrass you a little bit?
Yeah, no.
I wasn't, this is totally, it's good to stand. Don't ever stand in the back. Just kidding. Chuck and I are good friends, and he's been going through a hardship with his business. And Chuck and I, you know, when we started the church together, we were talking a lot, almost daily, you know, at least weekly, seeing each other, etc., excited about this new endeavor. And I'm going to say planting a church is a risk. And it's missional. It's about the kingdom. It's about a group of people that I hope buy into this and want to see a change. And I know Chuck's one of them. And his wife Misty and their family. But I hadn't heard from them in a couple of weeks. So finally I come up and go, what's going on? How's it going? And he just starts telling me he's getting handed. Just going through the hardships of life and big business things going on, impacting him financially and the family, etc. So I feel badly that I wasn't there. But then last Sunday, we had an opportunity to go out with another good friend of ours, Dave Witherell. There's just the three of us. And I've been thinking about it and praying about it. And I just wanted to tell Chuck, you're not alone. What do you have? What do you have? And I hope you have me. I got your back.